4-year-old beggar girl has her hair yanked by abusive father, but a millionaire saw it and you won't believe what he did. Comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt of the busy avenue when the scream echoed through the noise of cars and the chatter of passers-by. The childish voice, high-pitched and desperate, cut through the air like a knife, causing several people to stop and look around, searching for the origin of that blood-curdling sound. There, near the entrance of a luxurious shopping mall, a terrible scene unfolded before the horrified eyes of dozens of people. A disheveled-looking man with dirty and torn clothes was violently holding the hair of an extremely small girl. The child, who should have been 4 years old, looked only 2 due to her extreme fragility and visible malnutrition. The intoxicated man shook the girl as if she were a rag doll, his red eyes fixed on the passers-by who approached with morbid curiosity. "Give her the money!" he yelled, pushing the child towards the pedestrians. "She's hungry! Can't you see she's starving?" The girl cried silently, her tears leaving clean streaks on her face, soiled with dirt and soot. Her clothes were rags that barely covered her skeletal body, and her bare feet bled on the rough concrete. Each abrupt movement of the violent father made her shrink even more, like an injured animal trying to protect itself. Passers-by formed a semicircle around the pair, some whispering to each other, others taking out their cell phones to film, but no one dared to intervene directly. The man was clearly out of it, gesticulating erratically and talking to himself between the screams directed at his daughter. "You're useless," he yelled, shaking the girl by her thin arms. "Can't even beg properly. Look how ugly you are. No one will give you money like that." The child tried to balance on her fragile legs, but with each push from her father, she staggered and almost fell. Her big, dark eyes reflected a terror that no child should know, a deep sadness that seemed to have settled in her soul long before that moment. That's when the roar of a powerful engine echoed through the avenue. A luxury car, black and gleaming, slowed down and stopped right next to the sidewalk where the violence was happening. The sound of the engine died, and a tense silence took over the place. The driver's door opened slowly, revealing a 30-year-old man whose presence immediately caught the attention of everyone present. Tall, with an athletic build and features that seemed to have come out of a fashion magazine, he moved with the natural confidence of someone who had accumulated a considerable fortune over the years. His impeccable Italian suit contrasted drastically with the chaotic environment around him. The millionaire observed the scene for a few seconds, his blue eyes fixed on the girl who was trembling in her father's arms. Something in his expression changed. A shadow passed over his face, as if that vision had awakened memories he preferred to keep buried. "Hey, you!" shouted the drunken man when he saw the expensive car. "You got money! Give my daughter something, she's in need!" The millionaire approached with firm but controlled steps. The onlookers instinctively stepped back, recognizing the natural authority that emanated from him. When he got close enough, he stopped and studied the beggar's face for a moment that seemed eternal. "Let the girl go," he said in a calm voice, but loaded with an authority that made the air heavier. "Who do you think you are to order me around?" retorted the man, squeezing the child's arm even harder, who let out a low moan of pain. The millionaire took another step forward, decreasing the distance between them until he was face to face with the aggressor. Then he leaned slightly and whispered something in the drunk man's ear. The words were so low that none of the spectators could hear what was said. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. The beggar's face paled as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes widened with pure terror, and his hands trembled violently before abruptly releasing the girl. He backed away several steps, stumbling over his own feet. "No, it can't be," he murmured, his voice choked with fear. You are... "Get out of my sight," said the millionaire, his voice low but loaded with a veiled threat that made the man turn and run, disappearing into the crowd as if the devil were after him. The girl remained where she was, trembling like a leaf in the wind, not understanding what had happened. Her little eyes moved nervously between the place where her father had disappeared and the elegant stranger who was now crouching in front of her, trying to get to her height. "Hey, little one," he said softly, reaching out his hand slowly. "Are you hurt?" The child did not answer, only stared at him with those huge eyes that seemed to occupy half of her small, thin face. There was something in that look that went through all the millionaire's defenses, touching a part of his soul that he had kept carefully shielded for years. The crowd began to disperse gradually, some still whispering comments about what they had witnessed, others already losing interest and moving on with their lives. The millionaire remained crouched in front of the girl, watching how she shrank at every move he made, no matter how small. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently, noticing how the child's ribs stood out under her tattered t-shirt. She nodded timidly, without taking her eyes off the ground. Her small hands were trembling, and he realized it wasn't just from fear. It was from cold, too, despite the afternoon heat. Malnutrition had left her body unable to regulate temperature properly. "Let's find you something to eat," he said, standing up slowly. "You can trust me." The girl raised her eyes for the first time, studying his face with an intensity surprising for someone so small. There was a clear intelligence in that look, hidden under layers of trauma and fear. After a few seconds of hesitation, she took a hesitant step towards him. The millionaire guided her to a nearby restaurant, a sophisticated establishment where his presence was immediately recognized. The maitre d' approached with exaggerated bows, but stopped abruptly when he noticed the dirty and ragged child next to the illustrious client. "Sir, perhaps it would be better," the employee began, clearly uncomfortable. "A reserved table, please," interrupted the millionaire firmly, "and bring the best you have for children." Seated at a table away from the other customers, he watched as the girl devoured the food with a voracity that broke his heart. She ate like someone who didn't know when her next meal would be, saving pieces of bread in the pockets of her torn clothes. "Slowly," he said softly. "No one is going to take the food away from you." She stopped eating for a moment, looking at him suspiciously, but then returned to eating, this time a little slower. Between bites, her eyes moved constantly around the room, as if she expected someone to appear and take her away by force. "What's your name?" asked the millionaire after a few minutes. The girl did not answer, continuing to eat in silence. He realized that perhaps she did not speak, or simply did not trust enough to answer. Patience would be key. While he waited, he wondered what he should do. He couldn't just let her go back to the streets, not after what he had witnessed. But he couldn't take her home without better understanding the situation either. The image of the violent father fleeing in terror was still fresh in his mind, and he knew that that man would not return so soon. "Where do you live?" he tried again. This time she raised her small hand and pointed vaguely to the street, a gesture that indicated that the streets were her home. The reality of the situation hit the millionaire like a punch in the stomach. This child had no safe place to go. After finishing eating and saving a few more pieces of food in her pockets, the girl leaned back in her chair, her eyes beginning to feel heavy with sleep. Extreme fatigue was evident, as if she had not slept properly for weeks. The millionaire made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Do you want to come with me to a safe place?" he asked carefully. "A place where no one will hurt you." The girl's eyes widened again, a mixture of hope and terror passing through her small face. She had learned in the cruelest way that adults did not always keep their promises, especially promises of safety. "I have a big house," he continued, "with clean rooms and food always available. You can stay there until we find a good family to take care of you." The word family made the child shrink slightly, but the promise of safety was too tempting to resist. She nodded almost imperceptibly, and he felt a mixture of relief and responsibility weighing on his shoulders. The journey to his mansion was made in absolute silence. The girl settled into the leather seat of the luxury car like an injured animal, always alert, always ready to flee. She watched the changing landscape through the window, from the busy streets of downtown to the elegant residential neighborhoods, until they reached the imposing gates of his property. The mansion stood majestically against the twilight sky, its perfectly manicured gardens and its huge windows reflecting the golden light of the sun. For a child accustomed to the dirty and dangerous streets, that vision must have seemed like a fairy tale. "This is my house," he said, watching her reaction. "And now it's yours too, for as long as you need." Upon entering, the employees were visibly surprised to see the boss accompanied by a child in such a precarious state. The millionaire had lived alone on that property for years, since a devastating personal tragedy had completely changed the course of his life. The presence of a child was something completely unexpected. "Prepare the guest room on the second floor," he instructed the housekeeper, a middle-aged woman who had served him for decades, "and provide suitable clothes for her." The housekeeper, despite her surprise, nodded professionally and went to organize everything. The millionaire led the girl through the wide and elegant corridors, noting how she always stayed close to him, as if he were her only source of safety in that strange environment. The room prepared for her was larger than many entire apartments. It had a king-size bed with immaculate white sheets, fine wood furniture, and a privileged view of the gardens. For the girl, however, all that opulence seemed scary. She positioned herself in the farthest corner of the door, her back against the wall, her eyes fixed on the only exit. It was the behavior of someone who had learned to always have a planned escape route. "No one will enter here without your permission," said the millionaire, noticing her fear. "You can lock the door from the inside if you want." For the first time since he had met her, he saw something like relief pass through her face. The housekeeper brought clean clothes suitable for the child's size, as well as personal hygiene products. "There's a bathroom there," he pointed. "You can take a hot bath and dress in clean clothes. Then if you want, you can rest." The girl nodded and walked slowly to the bathroom, still distrustful. Before closing the door, she turned and looked at him for a moment that seemed eternal. In that look, he saw something that disturbed him deeply. Gratitude mixed with a sadness so deep that it seemed to have roots in her soul. When the bathroom door closed, the millionaire sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands over his face. He had acted on impulse, moved by something he could not completely explain. That fragile girl had awakened in him feelings that he had kept buried for years, reminding him of responsibilities he had chosen to forget. The sound of running water echoed through the room, and he wondered what secrets that child carried, what stories of suffering were written in each scar, each frightened look. More importantly, he wondered if he would really be able to protect her from the cruel world she knew so well. The first 3 days in the mansion passed in an almost sepulchral silence. The girl had not uttered a single word since her arrival, communicating only through minimal gestures and cautious glances. She remained locked in her room most of the time, leaving only to eat quickly in the kitchen before running back to her refuge. The millionaire observed these behaviors with growing concern. He had hoped that a safe and comfortable environment would help the child relax, but it was clear that the traumas she carried were much deeper than simple physical fear. Each loud sound made her shrink, each abrupt movement sent her to the farthest corner of the room. During meals, she ate with a desperate voracity, as if each plate was the last she would see. Even after 3 days of regular feeding, she continued to hide pieces of bread and fruit in her pockets, a habit developed during years of food insecurity. "Has she said anything yet?" asked the housekeeper one morning while preparing the girl's breakfast. "Not a word," replied the millionaire, watching through the dining room window. "Maybe she doesn't know how to speak properly, or maybe she has learned that silence is safer." The housekeeper shook her head sadly. In her 40 years working for wealthy families, she had seen many privileged children, but never one who carried so much suffering in such a small body. It was on the morning of the fourth day that something changed. The millionaire was in his office, reviewing reports of his stock market investments, when he heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. It wasn't the sound of something breaking, but something being dragged across the floor. Going up the stairs silently, he discovered the origin of the noise. The girl had left her room and was in the hallway, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Around her were pieces of paper, pages she had torn from a notepad she had found somewhere in the house. But they weren't just scattered papers, they were drawings, dozens of them, made with pencils she had probably taken from the office during one of her silent explorations. And the drawings were extraordinary, especially considering they had been made by a 4-year-old child. The millionaire approached slowly, trying not to scare her. The drawings showed faces, not the childish and disproportionate faces typical of a child, but detailed and accurate portraits. There was the face of the violent father, captured with a disturbing accuracy that included every wrinkle caused by alcohol, every frown line of anger. There were faces of other people too, women, men, children. "Do you know all these people?" he asked softly. The girl looked up and, for the first time, nodded deliberately. Then she pointed to one of the drawings, the portrait of a middle-aged woman with harsh features and cold eyes. "Who is she?" he continued, crouching down to get to the child's height. The girl opened her mouth for the first time in days, and from her throat came a hoarse and weak voice, as if it had not been used for a long time. "Stepmother." The word was pronounced with a load of fear and aversion that made the millionaire shiver. There was something in that word, in the way it was said, that suggested that the father's violence was only a small part of a much darker story. "Did she hurt you too?" he asked carefully. The girl did not respond verbally, but her eyes filled with tears. She picked up another piece of paper and began to draw frantically. This time the drawing showed the same woman, but in a scene. She was pulling the hair of a small child, the same child who was now sitting in the hallway of the mansion. The millionaire felt a rage growing in his chest. That child had suffered abuse not only from her father, but also from a female figure who should have protected her. The complexity of the situation was becoming clearer and more terrible with each revelation. "Where is she now?" he asked. The girl made a vague gesture towards the window, indicating that the stepmother was somewhere out there, in the world beyond the safe walls of the mansion. Then she picked up another piece of paper and started a new drawing, this one showing a small and dilapidated house. The details were impressive. She had drawn every loose board, every broken window, every piece of trash scattered around the yard. "Did you live there?" asked the millionaire. Another nod, but there were more details being added to the drawing. The girl was drawing other small figures, children, some inside the house, others scattered around the yard. All seemed to be in a state of suffering or abandonment. "Were there other children there?" he asked, a terrible suspicion beginning to form in his mind. "Many," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "Always many." The millionaire stood up abruptly, walking to the hallway window. His mind was processing the implications of what he was discovering. This was not just a situation of domestic abuse. It seemed to be something much larger and more organized. He turned to the girl, who continued to draw compulsively. Her little fingers moved the pencil with a precision that suggested not only artistic talent, but also an impressive photographic memory. Every detail she put on paper seemed to have been recorded in her mind with crystal clarity. "Can you remember all the places you've been?" he asked. She stopped drawing and looked him directly in the eyes for the first time since they had met. In that look, he saw a sharp intelligence and a determination that contrasted drastically with her fragile appearance. "All," she said simply. Over the next 2 hours, the millionaire watched fascinated as the girl created a visual map of a network of locations she had known, Abandoned houses, overcrowded apartments, commercial establishments that served as a front for questionable activities. Each drawing was accompanied by disturbing details. Children in deplorable conditions, adults who were clearly not biological relatives, situations that suggested systematic exploitation. When she finally stopped drawing, there were at least 20 sheets scattered across the hallway floor. It was a visual archive of horror that revealed the existence of an operation much larger than anything the millionaire could have imagined. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, genuinely curious about the girl's motivations. She studied him for a long moment before answering. "You're different." "Different how?" "You don't want to hurt me," she said, her voice gaining a little more strength. "And you can help others." The simplicity of the answer contained a wisdom that left him speechless. That 4-year-old child, who had survived unimaginable trauma, still maintained an ability to trust and a genuine concern for other children who were suffering as she had suffered. At that moment, the millionaire understood that his impulsive decision to save a girl from the streets had placed him at the center of something much larger. He wasn't just caring for a traumatized child. He had become the guardian of secrets that could expose an entire child exploitation ring. And as he watched the girl carefully organize her drawings, he also realized that his own life would never be the same. The secrets of the past he carried, the guilt that had haunted him for years, had somehow become intertwined with the fate of this extraordinary child. The office phone started ringing insistently downstairs, but he ignored it. At that moment, nothing else mattered, besides the revelation that he had become not only the protector of one girl, but potentially the only adult capable of saving many other children who were still suffering in silence in the shadows of the city. The relationship between the millionaire and the girl began to evolve gradually but steadily after the revelations through the drawings. She began to accept his presence with less tension, and he learned to interpret her gestures and facial expressions as a silent language they had developed together. During the following days, they established a peculiar routine. Every morning after breakfast, she would sit in the same hallway on the second floor with her papers and pencils, creating new drawings while he worked in his nearby office. At first, he pretended to be focused on his business and investments, but in reality, he spent most of his time watching her work. The precision of her memory continued to amaze him. She drew not only faces and places, but also sequences of events, like little comic strips that documented specific situations she had witnessed. In one particularly detailed drawing, she showed a white van pulling up in front of one of the houses she had drawn previously, with adults transferring children from one location to another. "Did this happen often?" he asked, pointing to the drawing of the van. "Every week," she replied, her confidence to speak gradually increasing. "They took some, brought others." The implication was clear and terrifying. It wasn't just one location where children were kept in poor conditions. It was an organized system of movement and distribution. The millionaire began to understand that he had stumbled upon something that went far beyond simple family neglect. It was during one of these drawing sessions that the girl did something unexpected. She stopped drawing other people and started drawing herself, not as she was now, clean and well-fed, but as she had been on the streets. The self-portrait showed a child even smaller and more fragile, with huge eyes in a gaunt face and clothes that were little more than rags. "Why are you drawing this?" he asked gently. "So I don't forget," she said, continuing to add details to the drawing. "To remember what it was like before you." The answer hit the millionaire in an unexpected way. That child was documenting her own transformation, creating a visual record of her journey from suffering to safety. It was both an act of gratitude and of self-documentation, as if she knew instinctively that her story was important and needed to be preserved. But the relative peace they had found was suddenly interrupted on a Wednesday afternoon. The millionaire was reviewing some reports of his fortune when the housekeeper appeared at the office door with a worried expression. "Sir," she said nervously, "there's a woman at the front door. She says she's a relative of the girl and that she's come to pick her up." The millionaire's blood ran cold. He ran up the stairs to the second floor, where he found the girl huddled in the corner of the hallway, trembling violently. She had heard voices coming from the entrance of the house and instantly recognized one of them. "It's her," the girl whispered, her eyes wide with pure terror. "The stepmother." Through the hallway window, the millionaire could see a middle-aged woman standing at the entrance of the property. She corresponded exactly to the drawing the girl had made: harsh features, aggressive posture, and a look of cruel determination on her face. "Stay here," he told the girl, trying to sound calmer than he really felt. "Don't come down for anything. I'll handle this." He went down to the ground floor and instructed the housekeeper to keep all doors locked before heading to the main gate of the property. The woman was outside, gesturing impatiently at the security guards. "You can't stop me from seeing my daughter," she yelled. "I have legal rights." "Ma'am," said the millionaire, approaching the gate without opening it, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The woman turned to him, and he immediately noticed something calculating in her eyes. She was clearly assessing his appearance, his expensive clothes, his demeanor of someone who possesses considerable wealth. "You must be the rich man who took my stepdaughter," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How kind of you to take care of her, but now I need to take her home." "The child is safe here," he replied firmly. "I see no reason for a change." "Reason?" The woman laughed bitterly. "She's my legal responsibility. I have the documents to prove it. And besides," her voice took on a threatening tone, "I know who you are." The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, you know very well," she said, moving closer to the gate. "I've discovered some interesting things about the rich man who suddenly developed an interest in street children. Things about your past, about a certain accident a few years ago." The words hit the millionaire like physical punches. She knew. Somehow, that woman had found out about the event that had changed his life completely. The secret he had kept for years and that consumed him with guilt every day. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. "Of course you do," she replied with a cruel smile. "And I bet you wouldn't want certain people to know the details, would you? Especially considering your position in society." The millionaire realized that he was being blackmailed. That woman had done her research, discovered his vulnerabilities, and was now using that information to get the girl back. But why did she want the child back so desperately? "What do you really want?" he asked directly. "First, I want my stepdaughter back. Second," she paused dramatically, "I want compensation for the time you've kept her here without my permission. Say, an amount that reflects your considerable wealth. And if I refuse, then tomorrow the whole city will know about what really happened on that rainy night 5 years ago. About how a drunk millionaire was driving when—" "Stop!" he said abruptly, his voice loaded with pain. The woman smiled triumphantly. She had found his weak spot and was willing to exploit it completely. "I have until tomorrow at noon to receive my stepdaughter back, along with a demonstration of your gratitude for my discretion. Otherwise, your entire reputation and your businesses will go down the drain." After saying this, she turned and walked towards an old car parked on the street. Before getting in, she yelled, "And tell the girl that Mommy Helena misses her." The millionaire remained standing at the gate for several minutes after she left, processing what had just happened. The blackmail was clear and effective. That woman had found out about the accident that haunted him, a night when his choices had resulted in terrible consequences that he had never been able to forgive himself for. When he finally returned inside the house, he found the girl waiting at the top of the stairs, her big eyes fixed on him. "Is she going to take me back?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. The millionaire looked at that child who had become so important to him in such a short time. He had a fortune built through smart investments and hard work, properties, stocks, even some applications in cryptocurrencies and gold. But at that moment, all his wealth seemed useless in the face of the dilemma he faced. "I don't know," he said honestly, an admission that hurt more than any financial loss he had ever suffered. The girl walked down the stairs slowly and approached him. For the first time since they had met, she reached out her little hand and touched his. "I don't want to go back," she whispered, and in those simple words was contained a universe of fear and hope that made his heart break. The night that followed the visit of the cruel stepmother was the longest the millionaire had ever lived. He stayed awake in his office, pacing back and forth, trying to find a solution that seemed increasingly impossible. Outside, the rain began to fall, beating against the windows with an insistence that painfully reminded him of that terrible night 5 years ago. The girl also couldn't sleep. She had returned to her behavior of the first days, locked in her room, refusing to eat and trembling at every sound she heard. The terror of being taken back to that life of suffering had undone all the progress they had made together. Around 3 in the morning, the millionaire heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Leaving his office, he found the girl sitting at the top of the stairs, hugging her knees to her chest. Her cheeks were wet with tears. "Can't sleep?" he asked, going up to sit next to her. She shook her head negatively, wiping her nose on the sleeve of the clean pajamas that the housekeeper had provided for her. "I know what she's going to do to me if I go back," the girl whispered, her voice choked. "She's going to hurt me a lot more than before." "Why?" asked the millionaire, although he feared the answer. "Because I ran away, and because now I know what it's like to be treated well," she said, looking at him with a disturbing wisdom for someone so young. "She's going to want to break me again." The words hit the millionaire like knives. The psychological cruelty implied in that statement, that knowing kindness would make subsequent suffering even worse, was an evil he could barely comprehend. "Tell me about her," he said gently. "About the woman you call stepmother." The girl took a deep breath, as if she were preparing to dive into deep and dangerous waters. "She's not really my stepmother," she began. "She was a friend of my mom's before Mom left. When that happened, she said she was going to take care of me, but really, she just wanted to use me." "Use you how?" "To get money. She made me beg in the streets. And if I didn't bring enough, she would hurt me. And there were other things too." The girl paused, clearly struggling to find adequate words to describe horrors that a child shouldn't know. "She rented the other children out to bad people," she continued, her voice getting even lower. "I was still too little, but she always said that when I got a little older." The millionaire felt nausea rising in his throat. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. That woman wasn't just abusive. She was involved in something much more sinister and organized. "How many other children?" he asked. "It always changed, sometimes 5, sometimes 10. She moved them from house to house so that no one stayed in the same place for too long. And you remember all those houses?" The girl nodded. "I drew some for you, but there are more, many more." At that moment, an idea began to form in the millionaire's mind. It was risky and could cost him everything he had built over the years, but maybe it was the only way to save not only the girl beside him, but all the other children who were still suffering. "What if I told you there was a way to stop her from hurting you again?" he asked carefully, "and also to help the other children." The girl's eyes lit up with a spark of hope, but there was also skepticism there. She had learned not to trust adult promises too much. "How?" "We would need to expose everything she's doing. Use your drawings, your memory, to show the right people where these other children are being kept." "But she said she was going to tell bad things about you," the girl remembered. "Things that would hurt you." The millionaire took a deep breath. It was time to be honest with her, as she had been honest with him. "5 years ago, I did something terrible," he began, his voice loaded with pain. I was driving on a rainy night after drinking at a business party. I wasn't too drunk, but I was over the legal limit. A car with a poor family broke down right in front of me, in the rain. They had gotten out of the car to try to fix it. The girl watched him attentively, without judgment, just listening. I could have stopped to help, he continued. I should have stopped, but I was afraid of getting involved, afraid they would find out I had been drinking. So I kept driving, pretending I hadn't seen anything. And then I found out that another car ran them over a few minutes later. An entire family, parents and a little girl. If I had stopped, if I had gotten them off the road or called for help, they would be alive today. The girl was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Is that why you saved me on the street? She asked finally. The question was simple, but it cut straight to the heart of the matter. Yes, he admitted. When I saw you being hurt, I remembered all the times I could have helped someone and didn't. I didn't want to do the same thing again. And now the bad woman wants to use that against you. Exactly. If she tells people, I'm going to lose everything. My company, my reputation, maybe even be prosecuted criminally. The girl got up and walked to the window, watching the rain that continued to fall. For several minutes she remained silent, and the millionaire began to wonder if he had made a mistake by telling the truth. Finally, she turned to him. The other children are still suffering, she said simply. Yes, and if we don't do anything, they're going to keep suffering forever. Probably yes. Then we have to do something, she decided, with a determination that contrasted with her fragile appearance. Even if it's dangerous. The millionaire watched her with growing admiration. That child, who had suffered so much, was still able to think of others before herself. It was a courage that many adults did not possess. It's going to be very risky, he warned. The stepmother might try to hurt us, and even if we manage to expose everything, I'm probably going to lose everything I have. Money you can get again, said the girl with a simplicity that left him speechless. But the other children only have one chance. At that moment, watching that fragile girl demonstrate a moral strength that he himself had lost years ago, the millionaire made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. All right, he said. We're going to save the other children. But first, I need to tell you exactly what that's going to mean. During the next hour, while the rain continued to fall outside, a wealthy man who had spent 5 years running from his conscience and a 4-year-old girl who had survived the unthinkable planned together how to expose a child exploitation ring. It was a plan that would require both of them to face their greatest fears. For him, it meant accepting the consequences of his past. For her, it meant remembering and documenting the worst moments of her short life. But for the first time in 5 years, the millionaire felt truly alive, and for the first time since she could remember, the girl felt that her life had a purpose beyond mere survival. Dawn was approaching when they finished discussing the initial details. They had less than 6 hours before the cruel stepmother's deadline, and a mountain of evidence to gather, and a criminal network to expose. The real battle was just beginning. The sun was rising on the horizon when the millionaire made a series of calls that would change the course of everything. The first was to his personal attorney, a discreet man who had taken care of his affairs for over a decade. The second was to a private investigator he had used previously to verify the integrity of potential business partners. I need you here at my house in an hour, he said on the phone, his voice loaded with urgency. And bring equipment to document evidence. While they awaited the arrival of the professionals, the girl worked feverishly, creating more drawings with details that she had stored in her extraordinary memory. Each stroke on the paper revealed new aspects of the criminal operation, routes the cars used, specific times of the movements, even physical descriptions of people involved in the ring. This man, she said, pointing to a drawing of a burly man with a scar on his face, he always came to pick up the older children. They cried a lot when he showed up. The millionaire felt his stomach churn with each new revelation, but forced himself to maintain composure. Each detail was a piece of the puzzle they would need to build a solid case. When the attorney and the investigator arrived, they found a surreal scene, one of the wealthiest men in the city sitting on the floor next to a small girl, surrounded by dozens of drawings that seemed to map out a complex criminal operation. "Sir," said the attorney, clearly disturbed, "you need to explain to me exactly what's going on here." Over the next hour, the millionaire told them everything, from the rescue of the girl to the stepmother's blackmail, to the revelation about his own dark past. The attorney and the investigator listened in growing silence, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. "This is extremely serious," said the investigator, examining the girl's drawings. "If half of what this child has documented is true, we're talking about an organized child exploitation ring. But there are huge legal problems," added the attorney. "First, you don't have legal custody of this child. Second, if the woman really has documents proving she's the legal guardian, technically she has the right to take her. And third, if she exposes your past." "I know the risks," interrupted the millionaire. "But I can't let this child go back to that situation, and I can't ignore what's happening to the others." The investigator crouched next to the girl, speaking to her in a gentle tone. "Would you be brave enough to show us some of these places? From a distance, just to confirm what your drawings show?" The girl looked at the millionaire, seeking approval. When he nodded, she turned to the investigator with determination. "I can show you," she said, "but it has to be quick." She said she'd be back at noon. It was only 9 in the morning, which gave them 3 hours to gather enough evidence. The group split up. The investigator would take the girl to recognize and photograph some of the locations she had drawn, while the attorney would begin preparing documents to formalize a complaint. The millionaire initially wanted to accompany the girl, but the investigator dissuaded him. "Your presence might attract unwanted attention," he explained. "It's better if she goes just with me, discreetly." The separation, even temporary, was difficult for both. The girl had developed an emotional dependence on the millionaire, and he found that he cared about her in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "I'll be back soon," she promised, touching his hand before leaving with the investigator. Alone with the attorney, the millionaire was forced to confront the full reality of his situation. Even if they managed to expose the criminal ring, he would likely face severe consequences for his past. "There's a possibility of a deal," suggested the attorney. "If you fully cooperate with the authorities, testify against the ring, maybe they can be more lenient about the incident from 5 years ago. And the girl, that's more complicated. Even if the stepmother is arrested, the Child Protective Services system will need to find a suitable family for her." The idea of losing the girl to the bureaucratic system was almost as terrible as the prospect of seeing her return to the cruel stepmother. But the millionaire was beginning to understand that his own emotional needs couldn't be the primary priority. 2 hours later, the investigator returned with the girl and with disturbing news. "We found 3 of the locations she drew," he reported, "and the situation is even worse than we imagined." The photographs he had taken discreetly showed children in deplorable conditions, exactly as the girl had described. Some appeared to be being prepared to be moved to other locations, confirming the transient nature of the operation. "There's more," continued the investigator. "We managed to identify some of the adults involved. One of them has a criminal record for similar crimes in other states." "Do we have enough evidence?" asked the millionaire. "We have enough for a full investigation," replied the attorney, "but we need to act fast." It was then that they heard the sound of a car approaching down the road, leading to the mansion. The millionaire looked out the window and felt his blood run cold. It was a familiar, old car. The cruel stepmother had arrived an hour before the established deadline. "She's here," whispered the girl, instantly transforming back into the terrified child she had been when she arrived. All the progress, all the courage she had shown during the morning seemed to evaporate in the face of her tormentor's proximity. "Stay calm," said the attorney, quickly gathering the documents and photographs. "We'll handle this professionally." But when the woman got out of the car, it was clear that she hadn't come alone. Two men accompanied her. One of them corresponded exactly to the drawing the girl had made of the man with the scar on his face. "She brought backup," murmured the investigator, his hand moving instinctively to his phone. "This complicates things." The cruel stepmother approached the main entrance of the property with an arrogant confidence, as if she had already won the battle. Her companions remained by the car, but their positions suggested that they were prepared to act, if necessary. "I've come to get what's mine," she shouted through the gate, "and I hope you've thought carefully about our conversation yesterday." The millionaire turned to the girl, who was trembling violently. "Remember what we talked about this morning?" he said gently. "About being brave?" She nodded, but her tears told a different story. "Do you still want to help the other children?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "Then let's face this together." The attorney pulled him aside. "Sir, I need to warn you. If we go out with her now, we're betting everything. There's no turning back." The millionaire looked once more at the girl, then at the evidence scattered on the table, finally at the cruel woman waiting outside. His entire life, his wealth, his reputation, his social standing was about to be put at risk for a child he had known for less than a week. But when he saw the girl's eyes, full of fear but also of desperate hope, he knew he had no choice. "Let's face this," he said, heading towards the door. "It's time to stop running from what's right." The final battle was about to begin, and neither side was prepared for the consequences of what was about to happen. The confrontation at the entrance of the property was more tense than any million-dollar negotiation the millionaire had ever faced. The cruel stepmother remained on the other side of the gate, flanked by the two intimidating men, while he approached accompanied by the attorney. The girl had remained in the house under the care of the housekeeper, but her invisible presence weighed on everyone present. "I hope you've thought carefully about my proposal," said the woman with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Where's my stepdaughter?" "Before anything," replied the attorney, taking control of the situation, "I'd like to see the documents that prove your legal guardianship of the child." The woman's expression hardened slightly. "I don't need to prove anything to you. She's been my responsibility since her mother left." "Actually, you do," insisted the attorney, pulling out a folder of documents. "According to our investigations, there's no official record of guardianship in your name." The man with the scar moved closer to the gate, his posture clearly threatening. "Enough with the paperwork," he said in a hoarse voice. "We came to get the girl. You can hand her over willingly or unwillingly." It was at that moment that the investigator appeared at the entrance of the house, carrying a camera and several papers. His presence seemed to leave the group outside visibly nervous. "Ms. Helena Santos," said the investigator, addressing the cruel stepmother directly, "also known as Helena Ribeiro and Helena Costa, depending on the city where she operates." The woman paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about an organized child exploitation ring that's been operating for at least 5 years in 3 different states. I'm talking about photographic documentation of locations where children are kept in inhumane conditions. And I'm talking about witnesses who can identify you as the coordinator of this operation." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind swaying the trees around the property. The two men who accompanied the woman exchanged nervous glances, clearly not expecting the situation to take this turn. "You can't prove anything," said the woman, but her voice had lost its previous confidence. "On the contrary," replied the millionaire, finally speaking, "we have very detailed evidence. Drawings made by an eyewitness who documented your operation with photographic accuracy. Drawings by a traumatized child don't serve as legal evidence," she retorted, but there was growing desperation in her voice. Maybe not, admitted the attorney, but they serve as a basis for a full investigation, and when the authorities visit the locations she's documented, they'll find much more concrete evidence. It was then that the cruel stepmother played her final card. Very well, she said, her tone turning venomous. If you want to play this way, then the whole city will know about what happened 5 years ago, about how this wealthy and respected man killed an entire family on a rainy night and fled the scene. The millionaire felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Even expecting this moment, hearing her words spoken aloud was devastating. It's true, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. I made a terrible mistake 5 years ago. A mistake that haunts me every day. The confession took everyone by surprise, including the cruel stepmother herself. I should have stopped to help that family, he continued. I should have called for help. Instead, I acted like a coward and ran. And because of my cowardice, 3 people lost their lives. Sir, whispered the attorney, clearly concerned about the public confession. No, said the millionaire, raising his hand. I've carried this weight for too long. Yes, I'd been drinking that night. Yes, I saw a family in danger and didn't stop to help. And yes, they lost their lives because another driver ran them over a few minutes later. The woman on the other side of the gate seemed to be losing control of the situation. Her main weapon, blackmail, was being neutralized by the brutal honesty of her victim. But you know what I've learned in these last few days? Continued the millionaire, looking directly at her. I've learned that carrying guilt is useless if you don't do anything to correct it. And I've learned that sometimes you have to risk everything to do what's right. At that moment, the girl appeared in the window of the 2nd floor of the house. Even from a distance, it was possible to see how she was trembling at the sight of the cruel stepmother. But there was also something different in her posture, a determination that hadn't been there before. She can destroy me publicly, said the millionaire, pointing to the cruel woman. She can ruin my reputation, my businesses, my position in society. But that won't stop the authorities from investigating the houses we found this morning. It won't save the other children who are still suffering. You're bluffing, said the stepmother, but her voice revealed uncertainty. I'm not, he replied simply. I'm willing to lose everything to protect this child and save the others. It was then that something unexpected happened. The man with the scar, who had remained quiet throughout the discussion, suddenly spoke. Helena, this has gone too far. They have real evidence. We need to go. Shut up, shouted the woman to him. No, you said it would be easy, that it was just a matter of getting the girl and the money. But now they're talking about investigations, about evidence. I'm not going to prison because of your crazy plans. The argument between the criminals revealed fissures in their alliance that the millionaire and his team were quick to exploit. If you leave now, said the investigator, addressing the man with the scar, I can guarantee that it will be considered as cooperation with the investigation. The man looked nervously between the cruel stepmother and the officers on the other side of the gate. Helena, they know everything. The locations, the children, everything. There's no way to continue with this. You're a coward, she shouted. All of you are cowards. Maybe, admitted the millionaire. I certainly was a coward for 5 years, but I'm not going to be anymore. The situation was clearly deteriorating for the criminals. The second man, who had remained silent until then, began to retreat towards the car. This isn't over, shouted the cruel stepmother, realizing that she was losing control of the situation. You're going to pay for this, all of you. Actually, said a new voice from behind the millionaires group, the ones who are going to pay are you. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was a middle-aged man in casual clothes, but there was something in his posture that suggested authority. Social worker Miguel Santos, he introduced himself, showing an identification. I received an anonymous report about possible child abuse on this property, but from what I'm hearing, it seems the situation is much more complex. The arrival of the social worker completely changed the dynamic of the confrontation. The cruel stepmother and her companions realized that they were surrounded. They couldn't leave without looking guilty, but staying meant facing official questioning. "I'd like to speak with the child in question," said the social worker. "And I'd also like to better understand this situation you're describing about other children in danger." The millionaire looked at the attorney, who nodded almost imperceptibly. It was the moment of truth. They would have to trust the system and hope that justice prevailed. "The girl is in the house," he said. "She has very important information about other children who are being exploited." As the social worker headed towards the house, the cruel stepmother made a last, desperate attempt to regain control. "That child is my legal responsibility," she shouted. "You can't stop me from taking her." "Actually," said the social worker, stopping and turning to her, "in cases of suspected abuse, the state has the authority to assume temporary custody of the child until the situation is properly investigated." And with those words, the cruel stepmother's house of cards finally collapsed completely. The presence of the social worker transformed what had been a private confrontation into an official investigation. The two men who had accompanied the cruel stepmother tried to escape discreetly, but the private investigator had already photographed their license plates and faces. The flight only confirmed their guilt before the authorities. "You can't just leave," shouted the stepmother to her retreating companions, but they were already running towards the car. In a matter of seconds, she found herself alone before the gate, her support network crumbling around her. Social worker Miguel Santos observed the scene with professional interest. "Ma'am," he said, addressing the woman, "I'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with the child who is on this property." "I don't have to answer anything," she replied, but her voice had lost all its previous arrogance. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right," agreed Miguel. "But first, I need to assess the well-being of the girl." While that was happening outside in the house, the girl had come down the stairs and was waiting in the main room. She had heard loud voices and shouts, and although she couldn't see exactly what was happening, she understood that the crucial moment had arrived. When the millionaire entered with the social worker, she hid behind the sofa, watching the stranger cautiously. Her experience had taught her that unfamiliar adults rarely brought good news. "Hi, little one," said Miguel in a gentle voice, crouching down to get to the child's height. "My name is Miguel. I'm a social worker, and my job is to take care of children like you." The girl looked at the millionaire, seeking approval. When he nodded encouragingly, she slowly emerged from behind the sofa. "Can I ask you a few questions?" continued Miguel. "Just to make sure you're okay and safe." Over the next hour, a careful conversation unfolded. Miguel was experienced in dealing with traumatized children, asking questions indirectly and allowing her to answer at her own pace. Gradually, the complete story emerged, not only about her own suffering, but about all the other children she had seen and helped when possible. "Did you make drawings of these houses where you saw other children?" asked Miguel. The girl nodded and ran to fetch her artistic creations. When she returned with the pile of papers, Miguel was visibly shocked by the accuracy and detail of the illustrations. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, examining each drawing. "You have an impressive memory." "She can remember everything," confirmed the millionaire. "Every detail, every person, every place." Miguel spent more time studying the drawings, occasionally asking specific questions about locations or people portrayed. His expression became increasingly grave as he understood the extent of what was documented. "I need to contact my supervisors immediately," he said, reaching for his phone. "This is much bigger than an isolated domestic abuse situation." While Miguel made his official calls, the millionaire sat next to the girl on the sofa. She was visibly exhausted from the stress of the day, leaning on him in the natural way she had learned to do in recent days. "What's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice small and weary. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted honestly. "But I know you're safe, and your information will help save the other children. What about you? The mean woman said she'd tell bad things about you." The millionaire took a deep breath. "She probably will, and maybe I'll have to face consequences for what I did 5 years ago, But that's okay. It's time I took responsibility for my mistakes." The girl was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Will you have to leave?" The question struck his heart. In recent days, he had grown so accustomed to her presence that he had not fully considered the possibility of separation. "Maybe," he said softly. "But even if that happens, you'll always have a safe place to stay. Miguel will take care of it." Miguel finished his calls and approached them with a serious expression. "My supervisors are mobilizing a special task force," he announced. "Based on the girl's information, they will conduct simultaneous operations in at least 6 different locations later today." "What about the stepmother?" asked the millionaire. "She will be detained for questioning. With the evidence you have gathered, plus the child's testimony, there is sufficient basis for serious criminal charges." The girl perked up at this. "Does that mean she can't hurt me anymore?" "No," Miguel said firmly. "She will never be able to hurt you again." It was then that Miguel addressed the most sensitive issue. "About your legal situation, sir," he said, addressing the millionaire. "I need to clarify a few points. Technically, you have no legal authority to keep this child." The millionaire nodded, expecting this. "I understand. However," Miguel continued, "considering the exceptional circumstances and the fact that the child has clearly established a secure bond with you, we can explore options to formalize a temporary arrangement." "What do you mean?" asked the girl, not fully understanding the legal terms. "It means that maybe you can continue living here while the authorities process the case against the people who hurt you," Miguel explained gently. "But first, we need to do some checks to make sure this is really the best place for you." The checks Miguel spoke of turned out to be extensive. Over the following days, social workers, child psychologists, and investigators circulated through the mansion, documenting everything and interviewing everyone involved. The girl underwent complete medical and psychological evaluations, which confirmed both the extent of her past traumas and her remarkable resilience. The millionaire was also investigated thoroughly. His financial background, his business reputation, even his motivations for helping the child were scrutinized. The process was invasive and stressful, but he cooperated fully, knowing it was necessary for the girl's well-being. Meanwhile, the operations based on the girl's drawings were surprisingly successful. In 3 days, authorities rescued 17 children from various locations, arrested 8 adults involved in the ring, and discovered evidence of an operation that spanned 4 states. "You saved all these children," Miguel told the girl one afternoon, showing her photographs of the rescued children in a safe hospital environment. "Your courage and your extraordinary memory made all of this possible." The girl studied the photographs carefully, recognizing faces she had seen in her worst moments. Seeing these other children clean, fed, and safe brought her a deep satisfaction that she could not express in words. But it wasn't all good news. As expected, the story of the millionaire's past leaked to the media. Tabloid newspapers ran headlines about millionaire flees fatal accident, and wealthy businessman hid crime for 5 years. His company suffered, some business partners distanced themselves, and he faced both criminal and civil investigations related to the incident 5 years ago. "Are you sorry?" the girl asked one night, noticing how tired and worried he looked after a particularly difficult day of legal depositions. "Sorry I helped you?" "Never," he replied without hesitation. "Sorry I didn't do the right thing 5 years ago, every day. But now you're doing the right thing." "I'm trying," he admitted. "Finally, I'm trying." The legal process that followed was complex and lengthy. The stepmother, Helena Santos, and her associates faced multiple criminal charges, while the millionaire dealt with his own legal consequences. But through it all, he and the girl developed an even stronger bond, united by the shared experience of facing the truth, however painful it was. It was during one of those difficult nights that the girl asked a question that changed both of their perspectives on the entire situation. Do you think your wife would be proud of you now? The girl's question about his wife hit the millionaire like a lightning bolt. In the 5 years since he lost his partner in a tragic accident, he had carefully avoided thinking about what she would think of his choices and actions. The pain of the loss had been so intense that any memory of her had become unbearable. I don't know, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. It's been a long time since I thought about it. Was she a good person? Asked the girl, with a child's natural curiosity, without realizing how deeply her question had moved him. She was the best person I ever knew, he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. It was bedtime, but neither seemed sleepy. She always cared about people who were suffering. She volunteered at hospitals, donated money to important causes, always tried to help those in need. Like me? Asked the girl. Yes, like you, he confirmed, smiling for the first time in days. She would have loved you immediately. And she probably would have scolded me for taking so long to do the right thing. The girl was thoughtful for a moment. I think she would be happy that you saved me. The child's simple words triggered something in the millionaire that had been dammed up for years. For the first time since his wife's passing, he was able to think about her without the pain being unbearable. Instead, he felt something like peace, as if she were approving of his recent actions. In the days that followed, this conversation changed something fundamental in his perspective. He began to see that his journey with the girl was not just about repairing past mistakes. It was about honoring the memory of someone who had always put the well-being of others above her own comfort. Meanwhile, the legal process against the child exploitation ring was progressing rapidly. Miguel Santos kept both the millionaire and the girl informed about the progress of the investigations, always taking care to explain things in a way that she could understand. The woman who hurt you will be tried along with the other bad adults, Miguel explained during one of his regular visits, and thanks to your information, they won't be able to hurt any more children. And the children who were saved? Are they okay? Asked the girl. They are being very well cared for, assured Miguel. Some have already found temporary families, others are still recovering in hospitals, but they are all safe now. The response brought a genuine smile to the girl's face, the first that the millionaire had seen in several days. Seeing other children safe and cared for seemed to mean more to her than her own safety. However, not all the news was positive. The millionaire's legal situation was becoming more complicated. Investigations into the incident 5 years ago revealed details that painted a more complex picture of the tragedy. Although he had not directly caused the accident that resulted in the loss of 3 lives, his decision not to stop to help had indirectly contributed to the fatal outcome. The district attorney is willing to make a deal, informed his attorney during a tense meeting. Admission of guilt for failure to render aid, extensive community service, and a substantial fine. But no jail time. And if I don't accept the deal, then we go to trial, and the outcome could be much worse, especially considering all the media attention. The millionaire looked out the office window, where he could see the girl playing in the garden with the housekeeper. In the past 2 weeks, she had become more outgoing and confident, but he knew that this was largely because she felt safe and loved. If he went to jail, all that progress could be lost. I'll accept the deal, he decided, but I want guarantees about the girl's situation. About that, we have good news, said the attorney, consulting his papers. Miguel Santos has submitted a report recommending that you be officially recognized as the child's temporary guardian, with the possibility of permanent adoption in the future. The news brought immense relief, but also a frightening responsibility. Adoption would mean that she would legally become his daughter, a responsibility that would last for the rest of his life. There are strict requirements, continued the attorney. Regular psychological evaluations for both of you, visits from social workers, adaptive parenting courses, And of course, you will need to maintain a stable and safe environment. I'll do anything, the millionaire said without hesitation. That night he had a serious conversation with the girl about what adoption would mean. "Does that mean you would be my real dad?" she asked, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "It means that I would take care of you forever," he explained. "Protect you, help you grow, always be here when you need me, like a real family." "And could I call you Dad?" The simple question deeply moved him. "If you want, yes." "I want to," she said, hugging him tightly. "I want it a lot." But the happiness of the moment was interrupted by an unexpected revelation that would change everything again. During the interrogations of Helena Santos, she had provided information about other crimes in an attempt to reduce her own sentence. One of these pieces of information directly concerned the millionaire. Miguel arrived at the mansion on a rainy morning with a grave expression that immediately put everyone on alert. "I need to talk to you about something very important," he said, asking to speak in private. In the office, with the door closed, Miguel revealed information that shook the millionaire to the bone. The woman confessed that she knew about the incident 5 years ago, before she even showed up here. Miguel began. "She didn't find out by chance. She already knew because she knew one of the victims." The millionaire felt the world spin around him. "What do you mean?" "The girl's mother, the woman who left the child in the care of the cruel stepmother. She was in the wrecked car that rainy night 5 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. The millionaire needed to sit down, feeling his legs weaken. "You're saying that her mother was in the car that I didn't stop to help?" "Yes," confirmed Miguel. "She was the daughter of the couple who lost their lives. She survived the initial accident, but was seriously injured. She spent months in the hospital, never fully recovered. She had the girl later, but the after effects of the accident and the emotional pain of losing her parents consumed her until she couldn't go on anymore. The revelation was overwhelming. The girl he had saved was the daughter of the woman he had left behind that terrible night. The connection between them was not coincidence. It was fate finally offering a chance for redemption that he didn't even know he needed. "Does the girl know this?" he asked hoarsely. "Not yet, but you need to decide whether you're going to tell her or not." The millionaire looked out the window at the garden where the girl was playing, unaware that her life was about to be turned upside down once again. How could he tell her that the man who was taking care of her was the same one who had failed to save her mother? How could he expect her to forgive him for a failure that had shaped his entire existence? "I need time to process this," he said finally. "You have until tomorrow," replied Miguel, "because tomorrow, during the stepmother's trial, this information will likely become public. It's better that the girl hears it from you before she hears it from strangers." That night, watching the girl sleep peacefully in her bed, the millionaire wondered if he would be able to face yet another devastating truth, and mainly, if the love they had developed for each other would be strong enough to survive the weight of this final revelation. Morning arrived with a persistent rain that seemed to mirror the millionaire's emotional state. He'd spent the entire night awake, pacing the halls of the mansion, trying to find words for a conversation that could destroy everything they had built together. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that you failed her mother in the cruelest way possible? The girl woke up later than usual, and when she came down for breakfast, she immediately noticed that something was wrong. The millionaire was sitting at the table, but he hadn't touched his food. His clothes were rumpled, as if he had slept in them, and his red eyes revealed a sleepless night. "Are you sick?" she asked, approaching carefully. "No, little one," he replied, trying to force a smile. "But I need to talk to you about something very important." The seriousness in his voice made the girl tense up immediately. In recent days, she had learned to associate important conversations with changes that weren't always good. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice small and worried. "No, you didn't do anything wrong," he assured her quickly. "Never. You've been perfect. It's about me, about something I did a long time ago." He guided her to the living room sofa, where they sat side by side. For several minutes he struggled to find the right words, while she waited patiently, her small hands folded in her lap. "Do you remember when we talked about my wife?" he began finally. The girl nodded. "And do you remember when I told you about the terrible thing I did 5 years ago, about how I didn't stop to help a family that was in danger?" Another nod, this time more hesitant. "Well, we found out something yesterday that changes everything," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "The family I didn't help, one of them was your mother." The girl was completely still, her large eyes fixed on his face, slowly processing the meaning of the words. "My mom was there?" she whispered. "Yes, she was in the car with your grandparents when they had trouble on the road, and when the other car hit them, she survived, but she was badly hurt. Your grandparents, they didn't make it." Tears began to roll down the girl's face, but she said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "Your mother spent months in the hospital recovering," he continued, each word a torture. "And it was because of the injuries that she was never able to take proper care of herself afterward. That's why she got sick and couldn't take care of you anymore." "Could you have saved her?" asked the girl, her voice almost inaudible. The question he feared most had arrived. "Yes," he admitted, tears now streaming down his own face. "If I had stopped, if I had gotten your family off the road, or called for help sooner, maybe the accident would have never happened. Maybe your mother would still be here with you." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. The girl lowered her head, her tears dripping onto the clean dress she was wearing. The millionaire waited, preparing himself for the anger, the hatred, the rejection that would surely come. But when she finally raised her eyes to him, there was no hatred there. There was pain, confusion, but also something he hadn't expected: understanding. "You didn't know it was my mom," she said simply. "No, I didn't know, but that doesn't make my choice any less wrong," he replied. "I should have helped anyone who was in danger, whether it was your mother or not." The girl was quiet again, and he could almost see the complex thoughts forming in her young mind. "Is that why you saved me?" she asked finally. "Because you felt bad about what you did to my mum?" The question was more insightful than anything an adult could have asked. "At first, yes," he admitted honestly. "When I saw you being hurt on the street, I remembered all the times I could have helped someone and didn't. But then what? Then you became important to me for yourself. Not because of the past, but because of who you are. You became like a daughter to me." The girl got up from the sofa and walked to the window, watching the rain that continued to fall. The millionaire watched her, his heart breaking as he saw her small shoulders trembling with silent sobs. "Can I be alone for a bit?" she asked without turning around. "Of course," he said, getting up to leave the room. "I'll be in my office if you need anything." For the next 2 hours, the house was strangely silent. The millionaire tried to work, but he couldn't focus on anything other than the occasional sound of small footsteps moving around the house. The housekeeper was also clearly worried, preparing the girl's favorite lunch in the hope of cheering her up. It was shortly after noon when the girl appeared at the office door. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was a determination in her posture that hadn't been there before. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Always," he replied, moving away from the desk. She approached slowly, and to his surprise, climbed onto his lap as she had done so many times in recent days. "I've been thinking," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "And what have you been thinking?" "You did a very bad thing 5 years ago," she said with the brutal honesty that only children possess. "Yes, I did," he agreed. "And because of that, my mom got hurt and then she got sick." "Yes. But," she continued, raising her head to look him directly in the eyes, "if you hadn't felt bad about it, you wouldn't have saved me from that mean woman." The simple but profound logic of the observation left him speechless. "And if you hadn't saved me," she went on, I'd still be suffering. And the other children would be suffering too, because no one would know where they were. That's true, he admitted, impressed by the maturity of her reasoning. So maybe, she said hesitantly, maybe your bad thing ended up helping a lot of people in the end. The simplicity of the observation struck the millionaire in a way that years of therapy and self-compassion never had. This child, who had lost everything because of his actions, was finding a way to transform it. The girl's perspective on how his personal tragedy had, inadvertently, led to the rescue of many other children brought a peace that the millionaire hadn't experienced in years. But that tranquility was abruptly interrupted when Miguel Santos arrived at the mansion that afternoon with disturbing news. "We have a problem," he announced, entering the room where the millionaire and the girl were trying to resume some normalcy. "The stepmother has gotten a very aggressive lawyer, and he's challenging our entire investigation." "How so?" asked the millionaire, automatically pulling the girl closer. "He's arguing that the girl's drawings aren't valid evidence, that she was coerced into making up stories, and that you orchestrated all of this to cover up your own criminal past." The girl cringed at this, clearly scared by the possibility that no one would believe her. "But the other children who were rescued," protested the millionaire, "they confirm everything she said. The lawyer is arguing that they were influenced by social workers and that their statements aren't reliable due to trauma," Miguel explained with evident frustration. "He's trying to discredit the whole case." "And succeeding?" asked the millionaire, dreading the answer. "Partially. The judge has agreed to hold a special hearing to re-evaluate the evidence. If we can't definitively prove the ring's guilt, they may be released." The news was devastating. After everything they had been through, the possibility that the criminals would escape justice seemed impossible to accept. "What does this mean for the other children?" asked the girl, once again demonstrating her concern for others above herself. "If the adults are released, they'll remain under state protection," Miguel assured her. "But the criminals will be free to start a new operation elsewhere." During the following days, an atmosphere of tension filled the mansion. The millionaire hired the best lawyers that his considerable wealth could buy, while Miguel worked tirelessly to strengthen the case. But the girl, realizing that her credibility was being questioned, began to regress emotionally. She stopped eating properly, started having nightmares again, and began to question whether her memories were real or imagined. The psychological pressure of having to prove that her drawings represented real events was deeply affecting her recovery. "What if they're right?" she asked one night, after another terrible nightmare. "What if I made it all up?" "You didn't make anything up," the millionaire said firmly, holding her as she trembled. "I saw your fear. I saw your scars." "I believe every word you said." But his words of comfort were interrupted by an unexpected discovery. The housekeeper, who had worked at the mansion for decades, appeared in the room with a strange expression on her face. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "I found something in the attic that might be important." What she had found was an old box containing belongings of his late wife. Among old letters and photographs, there was a diary where she documented her volunteer work with at-risk children. "Your wife knew some of these children," said Miguel, examining the pages carefully. "There are entries here that mention a Helena, who was operating a suspicious home for street children." The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying my wife knew about the stepmother, Helena Santos?" "More than that," replied Miguel, pointing to a specific entry. "She was informally investigating the operation. There are names here, addresses, even times when children were being moved." The revelation was extraordinary. The millionaire's wife had been trying to expose the same criminal ring that they were now fighting. It was as if she was, in some way, guiding them from beyond. "There's more," continued Miguel, turning the pages. "She mentions a specific girl, a child of about 2 years old, who was being kept by Helena, but who was rarely seen in public." The millionaire looked at the girl, who was listening to everything with growing attention. The dates in the diary corresponded exactly to the period when she would have been that age. "She was trying to save me too?" asked the girl, touching the diary pages gently. "It seems so," confirmed Miguel. "Your wife had documented enough evidence to open an official investigation, but she passed before she could act," completed the millionaire, understanding the tragic irony of the situation. During the following days, the late wife's notes proved to be the key to significantly strengthening the case. They provided independent corroboration for much of the information that the girl had provided through her drawings, proving that a respected adult had come to the same conclusions years before. More importantly, the diary contained information about adults involved in the ring who had not been captured in the initial operation. With these additional leads, authorities were able to arrest 3 more people, including someone in a position of authority who had been protecting the operation. "This diary changes everything," said the attorney during a strategic meeting. "Now we have contemporary documentation from a completely independent source that confirms the girl's accounts." The special hearing was scheduled for a week later. During this time, the millionaire noticed a fundamental change in himself. For the first time since his wife's passing, he felt he was truly honoring her memory, not just carrying guilt for her absence. "Do you think she knew?" the girl asked one afternoon, referring to the deceased wife. "That one day you would find me?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I like to think that maybe she left those clues for us to find when the time was right." The girl smiled, the first time he had seen her truly happy since the revelation about her mother. "I wish I had met her. She would have loved you as I love you," he said, realizing that he had voiced the feeling that had been growing in his heart for weeks. "You love me?" she asked, her eyes shining. "More than I thought possible," he admitted. "You've become my daughter in every way that matters." That night, as the girl slept peacefully for the first time in days, the millionaire sat in his office reading more pages from his wife's diary. In one particularly poignant entry, she had written about her desire to have children and her frustration at not being able to help all the children she encountered in her volunteer work. "One day," she had written, "I hope we can do more, that we can truly save one of these children and give her the love she deserves." Looking up at the room where the girl slept, the millionaire felt that, in some mysterious way, his wife's wish was finally being fulfilled. And for the first time in 5 years, he felt truly at peace with himself and with the choices he was making. The hearing was fast approaching, and with it, the final decision that would determine not only the fate of the criminals, but also the future of the extraordinary girl who had changed his life forever. But now, armed with the evidence of the past and the determination of the present, he was ready to fight for her with everything he had. The day of the special hearing arrived with a storm that transformed the courthouse into a dramatic setting worthy of the importance of the moment. The millionaire arrived early, wearing his best suit, not out of vanity, but because he understood that every detail would matter in the impression they made on the judge. The girl, who had insisted on being present despite Miguel's attempts to spare her the experience, wore a blue dress that the housekeeper had bought especially for the occasion. She carried a small folder containing her most important drawings, carefully organized in chronological order. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked the millionaire one last time before entering the courtroom. "I am," she replied, with a determination that contrasted with her fragile appearance. "The other children need me to be brave." The courtroom was packed. Besides the lawyers and officers, there were journalists, social workers, and even some relatives of the rescued children. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the expectation that this hearing would define the fate of many people. Helena Santos and her accomplices were seated on the opposite side of the room, accompanied by lawyers who seemed overly confident for the millionaire's liking. The woman showed no sign of remorse, watching the room with the same calculated arrogance she had shown at the entrance to his mansion weeks ago. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern but fair expression, called the session to order. This hearing has been convened to re-evaluate the evidence in the case against Helena Santos and associates, he announced. Due to the sensitive nature of the case and the age of the main witness, we will take special precautions. The first to testify were the social workers and investigators who had participated in the rescue operations. They presented photographs of the locations, medical reports of the rescued children, and detailed documentation about the conditions in which the children were found. But when it came time for the defense to question the evidence, Helena Santos's lawyer was relentless. He questioned every procedure, suggested that the photographs had been manipulated, and argued that the rescued children were too traumatized to provide reliable testimony. "These allegations," said the lawyer in a dramatic tone, "are based entirely on the fanciful drawings of a 4-year-old who has clearly been influenced by a wealthy man trying to cover up his own crimes." The millionaire felt anger rise in his chest, but forced himself to maintain composure. The girl next to him was visibly shaken by the lawyer's words, her small hands trembling over the folder of drawings. It was then that Miguel stood up to present the evidence that could change everything. "Your Honor," he said, "I would like to present contemporary documentation that independently corroborates the girl's accounts." The late wife's diary was presented as evidence, along with authenticated copies of the relevant pages. Miguel methodically explained how the notes made years ago corresponded exactly to the details provided by the girl in her drawings. "This documentation," explained Miguel, "was created by a woman respected in the community, known for her work with at-risk children years before the current events. There was no way she could have been influenced by the present circumstances." The defense lawyer tried to discredit the diary, suggesting it could have been forged, but the graphological analysis and authentication by experts made that line of defense untenable. When it finally came time for the girl to testify, she stood up with a determination that impressed the entire room. The judge had ordered that the procedure be adapted to her age, allowing her to sit at the prosecutor's table instead of using the intimidating witness stand. "Can you tell me your name?" asked Miguel gently. To the surprise of everyone, including the millionaire, she replied clearly, "My name is Ana Santos." It was the first time she had revealed her real name since they had met. The millionaire felt a profound emotion at finally knowing what she was really called. "Ana," continued Miguel, "can you explain to the judge how you made these drawings?" Over the next hour, Ana methodically described how she had created each illustration, explaining details that only someone who had really been there could know. Her extraordinary memory shone as she described specific colors of walls, arrangement of furniture, even patterns of cracks on the ceilings of certain houses. "And are you sure all of this really happened?" asked Miguel. "I'm sure," replied Ana in a firm voice. "I remember everything because it was very scary. When bad things happen, we remember every little piece." When the defense lawyer tried to question her, his aggressive approach quickly backfired. Ana answered each question with honesty and details that made it impossible to doubt her credibility. "Don't you think you might have imagined some of these things?" asked the lawyer condescendingly. "I don't imagine things that hurt me," Ana replied simply. "Why would I make up that someone hurt me?" The simple but devastating logic of the response left the lawyer speechless. Several people in the audience were seen wiping their eyes discreetly. The most impactful moment came when Ana was questioned about her relationship with the millionaire. Instead of answering directly, she asked permission to show a specific drawing that she had made the night before. The drawing showed two figures, one large and one small, holding hands in front of a house. But unlike her previous drawings, this one did not show sadness or fear. It showed hope. "He saved me," said Ana, looking directly at the judge. Not because he had to save me, but because he wanted to, and now I have a real family." The emotional impact of her words reverberated throughout the room. Even some of the defense lawyers looked visibly shaken. When Anna finished her testimony and returned to sit next to the millionaire, he whispered, "I'm so proud of you." "I'm proud of both of us," she replied, making him smile despite the tension of the moment. The judge announced a recess to deliberate, leaving everyone present in suspense. During the wait, the millionaire and Anna walked through the halls of the courthouse, both lost in thoughts about what the future might hold. "If they don't believe me," said Anna suddenly, "will you still want me as your daughter?" The question revealed her deepest fears, not just about the court's decision, but about whether the love they had found in each other was conditional on the outcome of the case. "Anna," he said, crouching down to her height, "you are my daughter no matter what happens in this room, no matter what any judge says. You will always be my family." When they returned to the courtroom, the judge was ready to announce his decision. The tension was palpable as he stood, the folder of documents in his hands containing the fate of all those involved. "After carefully reviewing all the evidence presented," he began, his voice echoing through the silent room, "including the extraordinary testimony of a very brave young girl, I have reached a definitive decision in this case." The silence in the courtroom was deafening as the judge organized his papers before delivering the decision that would define the destiny of so many lives. Anna held the millionaire's hand tightly, her small fingers icy cold, revealing the anxiety she was trying to hide behind her courageous facade. "The evidence presented in this case," began the judge in a solemn voice, "reveals a criminal operation of child exploitation that operated with impunity for years, causing indescribable suffering to innocent children." Helena Santos maintained her arrogant expression, but the millionaire noticed how her hands trembled slightly on the defense table. "The testimony of young Anna Santos," continued the judge, "demonstrated exceptional courage and a precision of memory that has been corroborated not only by physical evidence, but also by the contemporary documentation left by the late wife of the gentleman who took her in." Anna took a deep breath as she heard her name being mentioned with respect by the judge. "Therefore," said the judge, raising his voice, "I find Helena Santos and her associates guilty on all counts related to the exploitation and abuse of minors. Helena Santos is sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. A murmur of relief swept through the room. Anna turned to the millionaire with tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness. "Furthermore," continued the judge, "considering the extraordinary circumstances of this case and the clear and beneficial emotional bond established between Anna Santos and her current guardian, I immediately authorize the legal adoption of the minor." The millionaire's heart almost stopped. He had expected a long and bureaucratic process, not an immediate decision. "Anna Santos," said the judge, addressing the girl directly, "would you like to officially become the daughter of the man who saved you?" "Yes," replied Anna without hesitation, her voice echoing throughout the entire room. "More than anything." "Then so be it," declared the judge, banging his gavel. "Anna Santos is officially under the permanent and legal custody of her adoptive father." The burst of emotion in the room was immediate. Anna jumped into the millionaire's arms, both crying with happiness. Miguel smiled broadly, the journalists furiously taking notes, and even some of the defense lawyers seemed relieved at the end of a case that had weighed on everyone's conscience. But the celebration was interrupted when Helena Santos stood abruptly from the defense table, her mask of composure finally falling. "This isn't over!" she screamed, pointing at Anna. "That damn girl destroyed everything. She always was a plague since she was born." "Madam, be seated immediately," ordered the judge, but Helena continued to shout. "You think you've won?" she bellowed at Anna, who hid behind the millionaire. "You may have a rich family now, but you'll always carry the mark of what you are, an orphaned beggar that nobody wanted." The cruel words hit Anna like physical slaps, making her recoil even further. But before the millionaire could react, something extraordinary happened. Anna stepped out from behind him and stood directly in front of the woman who had made her life a living hell. "You're wrong," she said, her small but firm voice echoing through the silent room. "I'm not an orphaned beggar. I'm Anna, and I have a family who loves me. And you will never be able to hurt me again." The simplicity and dignity of a 4-year-old's response to her tormentor left everyone in the room completely speechless. Helena Santos was quickly removed by the security officers, her empty threats echoing through the corridors until they disappeared. When the commotion finally subsided, Anna turned to the millionaire with the most radiant smile he had ever seen. "Am I really your daughter now?" she asked. "Forever," he replied, picking her up in his arms. "Anna, my Anna." In the days following the hearing, a new routine settled into the mansion. Anna, now officially part of the family, blossomed in ways that surprised even Miguel, who continued to make regular visits to monitor her adaptation. "She's transforming before our eyes," he commented during one visit. "The traumatized child I met months ago is becoming a normal, happy girl." It was true. Anna had started to laugh more, to ask questions about everything, to demonstrate the natural curiosity of a 4-year-old. Her drawings also changed. Instead of the somber portraits of suffering, she now created colorful images of flowers, animals, and her new family. The millionaire had also changed profoundly. The nightmares that had haunted him for 5 years diminished significantly. For the first time since his wife's passing, he woke up every morning with a clear purpose: to take care of Anna and ensure that she had everything she needed to grow up strong and happy. His company, which had suffered from the negative publicity of the previous months, began to recover. Surprisingly, many clients returned, impressed not with his wealth or business success, but with his courage in facing his past mistakes and his dedication to protecting a vulnerable child. "The public loves stories of redemption," explained his lawyer during a meeting about the damage to his reputation. "You've become a symbol of how people can change and do good." But for the millionaire, none of that mattered as much as the small, everyday moments with Anna. Reading stories to her before bed, helping her with puzzles, or simply sitting in the garden watching her play. These were the moments that truly defined his new life. One afternoon, about a month after the hearing, Anna asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad," she said, she had started to call him that naturally, "do you think my real mom would be happy that you're taking care of me?" The question touched a wound that he thought had healed. I'd like to think so," he replied carefully. "I think she would be," said Anna, with the simple confidence of a child. "Because now you're doing good things, and she probably wanted someone to take care of me when she couldn't anymore." The unexpected wisdom of the observation left him speechless. This extraordinary child had found a way to transform even the deepest guilt into something akin to peace. That night, after Anna fell asleep, the millionaire sat in his office, looking at the photographs of his late wife that he had put back on display, after years of keeping them stored in drawers. For the first time, he was able to look at them without debilitating pain. "Thank you," he whispered to the photographs, "for guiding me to her, for giving me a second chance to do what's right." As if responding to his words, a gentle breeze moved the curtains of the open window, bringing the aroma of the flowers that Anna had helped plant in the garden that week. 3 months after the hearing, news arrived about the other children who had been rescued. All were recovering well. Some had been reunited with distant relatives, others had found loving adoptive families. The exploitation ring had been completely dismantled, and several other similar operations in neighboring states had been exposed and shut down as a result of the investigation. "You saved a lot more children than you realize," Miguel told Anna during one of his visits. "Your courage changed the lives of dozens of other children." "It wasn't just me," replied Anna with surprising maturity. "It was Daddy, too. and the lady who wrote in the book, and you, and everyone else who helped. The girl's humility and perspective continued to impress everyone around her. She had transformed her trauma into strength, her pain into compassion for others. That night, while tucking Anna into bed, the millionaire reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to that moment. From a chance encounter on a busy street, they had built something neither of them had expected to find. A true family, based not on obligation or convenience, but on genuine love and mutual choice. "Dad," murmured Anna, already half asleep, "tomorrow can I show you my new drawing?" "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, kissing her forehead. "What's it about?" "It's about our whole family," she said sleepily. "You, me, Mommy who's in heaven, and your wife who's also in heaven. All together taking care of each other." As she drifted off to sleep, the millionaire remained by her bedside, watching his daughter's peaceful breathing. Tomorrow would be another day in their new life, a life he had never planned, but which had become richer and more meaningful than any fortune he had accumulated over the years. A full year had passed since that rainy day that forever changed the lives of the millionaire and Anna. The date marked not only the anniversary of when they met, but also the day Anna would turn 5 years old, an age she had never expected to reach during her darkest months. The mansion was festively decorated for the first time since the millionaire's wife had passed. Anna had insisted on helping with all the preparations, her little hands arranging flowers that she herself had chosen from the garden they now cared for together. "Daddy," she said that special morning, "can I show you my surprise now?" For weeks, she had been secretly working on something special, refusing to reveal what it was. The millionaire, who had learned to value every little surprise she created, nodded with genuine curiosity. Anna ran to her room and returned carrying a homemade scrapbook that she had made with the help of the housekeeper. The cover was decorated with colorful drawings of birds flying free, a complete evolution from the sad and caged birds she used to draw in the past. "It's the story of our family," she announced proudly, opening the first page. What followed was an extraordinary visual narrative told through the eyes of a child. The first page showed somber drawings of her time on the streets, but they were no longer haunted by terror. Instead, they were presented as the before of a story of transformation. "This was me when I was lost," she explained, pointing to the drawing of a small, scared girl. "But I didn't know you were looking for me." The following pages showed the millionaire not as the wealthy man who saved her, but as someone who was also lost until he found her. She had drawn him alone in his large mansion, surrounded by wealth but without true happiness. "You were sad too," she said, turning the page. "Because of the pretty lady who had to leave, and because of my mom that you couldn't save." Her understanding of the emotional complexities of their situation continued to surprise the millionaire. At 5 years old, she possessed a wisdom about trauma, loss, and healing that many adults never developed. The middle pages of the scrapbook documented their journey together, from the first difficult days to moments of mutual discovery. There were drawings of him teaching her to read, of her teaching him to laugh again, of the two of them planting flowers in the garden, where now grew the most beautiful roses he had ever seen. "Here is when we discovered we were a family," she said, showing a drawing of both of them sitting at the breakfast table, laughing at something she had said. But it was the last section of the scrapbook that brought tears to the millionaire's eyes. Anna had created pages entitled Our Future, showing prophetic drawings of moments that had not yet happened. Her growing up, him growing old, but always together, always taking care of each other. "When I grow up," she said, pointing to a drawing of a teenage Anna, "I'm going to help other children like you helped me. And when you get old, I'm going to take care of you like you took care of me." The last drawing showed 4 ethereal figures watching them from above. Her biological mother, the millionaire's deceased wife, and surprisingly, The grandparents she had never met but that he had mentioned once. "They're proud of us," she said with absolute certainty. "Because we turned bad things into good things." At that moment, looking at the scrapbook that summarized not only their journey but also hopes for the future, the millionaire fully understood the magnitude of the transformation that had occurred in both of them. He had started as a wealthy but emotionally bankrupt man, carrying guilt and isolation. She had started as a traumatized child, surviving in unimaginable conditions. Together, they had become something that neither of them could have achieved alone, a true family built on genuine love and shared purpose. "Anna," he said, hugging her tightly, "this is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." "It's not a gift," she corrected with a smile. "It's our story, and we're still writing it." The party that followed was small but meaningful. Miguel came with his own family, including a daughter Anna's age, who quickly became her friend. The housekeeper, who had become a loving surrogate grandmother, brought the cake they had made together. Even some of the investigators who had helped in the case showed up, curious to see how the brave girl was developing. But the most touching moment came when Anna blew out the candles on her cake. Instead of making a traditional wish for herself, she closed her eyes and said aloud, "I wish that all the children who are suffering find someone like my daddy to take care of them." The simplicity and generosity of the wish moved everyone present. This child, who had known the worst of humanity, still chose to use her special moment to think of others. Later that night, after all the guests had left and Anna had fallen asleep exhausted but happy, the millionaire sat in his office reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to that point. On his desk was a letter that had arrived that morning, one of the many he regularly received from families who had adopted the other rescued children. This one was from a family upstate, thanking him for the role he and Anna had played in exposing the criminal ring. "Our adoptive daughter is flourishing," the letter read. "She often talks about the brave girl who helped save her. We hope one day we can thank you in person." It was just one of dozens of similar letters that had arrived over the months. The impact of Anna's courage had spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined, touching lives in multiple states and inspiring changes in child protection policies. His own businesses had also evolved. He had established a foundation using a significant portion of his fortune, focused on helping children in vulnerable situations. Anna had insisted on helping choose the projects that would receive funding, demonstrating a remarkable intuition for identifying initiatives that would truly make a difference. "Money is only important if it helps people," she had said during a foundation meeting, an observation that had become the organization's unofficial motto. While organizing some papers on his desk, the millionaire found a photograph he had taken of Anna a few weeks before. She was in the garden, laughing as she chased butterflies, her hair flying in the wind, her expression radiating the pure joy that only truly happy children possess. It was impossible to reconcile that image with the terrified and malnourished girl he had found on the street a year ago. The transformation had been so complete that sometimes he questioned if he had dreamed the first difficult months. But then he looked at his own photo albums, now filled with happy moments with Anna, and realized that his own transformation had been equally dramatic. The somber and isolated man he had been also seemed like a character from another time. A soft noise pulled him from his thoughts. Anna was at the door, still in her pajamas, holding her favorite teddy bear. "Can't sleep?" he asked, opening his arms to her. "I had a good dream," she said, climbing onto his lap. "I dreamed that we were birds flying together over the city, and all the other birds were safe in warm nests." "That's a beautiful dream," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "thank you for saving me." "Thank you for saving me too," he replied, fully understanding the reciprocal truth of that exchange. "How so?" "You taught me that it's never too late to do the right thing. You taught me that family isn't about blood, but about love, And you taught me that even the most difficult beginnings can have happy endings." Anna smiled and settled more comfortably in his arms. "So we saved each other." "Yes," he agreed, "we saved each other." As he carried her back to her room, the millionaire looked out the window at the garden where they had planted so many flowers together. The roses were blooming magnificently, their vibrant colors visible even in the soft moonlight. It was a perfect metaphor for their own lives. Seeds planted in soil that seemed infertile, nurtured with love and patience, blossoming into something more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. Tucking Anna into her bed, he whispered, "I love you, my daughter." "I love you too, Daddy," she murmured, already almost asleep. "Forever and ever." And as he walked back to his room, the millionaire knew that they had found something that all his wealth in dollars, his investments in stocks, or even his holdings in gold could not buy. They had found each other. And together, they had discovered that true love can transform any story, no matter how dark its beginning, into a tale of hope, redemption, and happiness that would last forever.